I will go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Pat Baker. I am from Lilburn, Georgia, which is near Stone Mountain. People usually know the Stone Mountain landmark more than they do Lilburn. It's east of Atlanta, and came down yesterday. I am the president of the Presbyterian Older Adult Ministries Network. And have been involved with that organization since its inception in the early 1980s. In your packet, you should have gotten a brochure on POAMN, and that's the Presbyterian Older Adult Ministries Network. As I commented earlier around the cake, we've been around for about 40 years now. We actually were formed, the Presbyterian Church USA did a special offering in the early 80s to support older adult ministry. And with that offering, it was a national offering. And with that offering, we assigned around 400 retired ministers across the United States and Presbyterian churches to start older adult ministries in their congregations. They were called enablers, which now is probably not a good terminology, but at the time they thought it was great. So that was what they were doing. At the same time, there were two of us in the nation that were doing older adult ministries in our 30s, myself and a woman by the name of Jan McGilliard in Virginia. And so these older ministers, the retired ministers, kind of took us under their wing. And so between them and Jan and I, we put together POAMN. We've been really going since then. Unfortunately, we don't have the staff that Aloha has. We have one very part-time support staff person, then everybody else is a volunteer on our board of directors. And so we aren't a huge organization, but we have, Peppy, around a couple hundred members, I believe. So the brochure will tell you a lot more about what we do. We mainly serve as a resource for anyone wanting to do older adult ministry, any denomination. One thing that we're really proud of is through Columbia Theological Seminary in Atlanta and their Center for Lifelong Learning, we offer an older adult ministry certification class, which is 4 classes over a 2-year period. And it has been in person until recently, and now it's all virtual well, I think now it's kind of hybrid in between. So that's among several other things that we do. But anyway, I'll be more than glad to answer any questions that you have about POAMN. Peppy Bowman, raise your hand. She's here with me. She's my left arm. I broke my shoulder on January 3rd. So I'm sort of limping on one arm, and she came down with me. She lives in the Atlanta area also to help me. It's negotiating an airport with one arm is just not easy. So she's my care partner for this trip, and I really appreciate her a lot. Okay, any questions about POAMN before I get started? Anybody? All right, great. It's good to be here with all of you today. Okay, so we're going to talk about care partners from the receiving end. And I don't know, do we want to put it, since I'm not going to use slides, can we close that up? Or is that okay with everybody that they got that blue screen up? Anybody? Can we close that up or just leave it like that? Okay. So my background is mainly working with older adults in the arena of government planning and programming. I started working with government programs for seniors in 1973, right out of college. So I have lived my entire life as kind of an intergenerational life as a younger person working with older adults. And then I am one now. I think I told the group earlier that I was so happy to have my 60th birthday, because then I actually was eligible for all the programs that I had worked for all of those years. I even held my birthday party at a senior center, one of my senior centers in Gwinnett County. And I have a twin sister who wasn't nearly as excited to be 60 as I was, but she did come to the party. But it was really great to know that I had come of age finally. But in the 80s, I took a little turn and had challenged a a minister at my church, when I was looking from the choir loft over the congregation, I was seeing a lot more whiteheads in the congregation than I was anybody else. And so when the budget came up at the church for the church to approve, I went to the minister after the meeting and said, so I didn't really see anything in your budget for older adult ministry, but I really see a lot of older adults out there in the congregation. So, what is the church going to do about it? Well, 2 ministers later, I asked the same thing. I asked it every time. And the man said to me, the minister at the time said to me, well, I don't know. What do you think we should do about it? And so he put the gauntlet out there. And so I proposed an older adult ministry for that congregation. It just so happened that one of the matriarchs of the church died about that time. She left $1 million to the church to be used for programming only. Now, the older adult ministry did not get $1 million, but we were given the go-ahead to start an older adult ministry in that church. And so that was, and as I said, that was in the early 80s when I was when I was quite young. So that started my career in older adult ministry. And I did 2 older adult ministries there over a 10-year period. And then I'm back after retirement from my government job, which paid well and gave me a pension. I'm back into now working in older adult ministry again at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Tucker, Georgia. And I'm so happy to be there. So in my 50-year career almost of working with older adults, I early on in the early 80s discovered that who also needed help and really came to me often were people that were caring for somebody, that were caregivers for parents or spouses. And so I started my first caregiver support group about in 1981. And I facilitated caregiver support groups every place that I've lived. I had them in Texas and Oklahoma, and now I have them in Georgia. Right now, I'm facilitating 3 caregiver support groups. One for the Emory's Integrated Memory Care Clinic. So those are all caregivers of persons with dementia. And then I do one for the county that I worked for was Gwinnett County, which has about 1 million people, and it's the 2nd to largest county in Georgia. And I did one for Gwinnett County employees who were family caregivers also. And so I had a support group for them. And then I've always had my own support group out of my home. So those are the 3 support groups that I'm now doing. And all 3 of them are virtual and have been for the last couple of years. I also had the privilege for about 6 years to do work as an employee and a trainer for the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregivers. She has a big heart for caregivers and is doing great things through that institute through Georgia Southwestern University. She is famous for coining the statement, there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who currently are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. So I'm going to talk to you, and raise your hand if any of those fit you. Okay, I expect you all to raise your hand because you might need a caregiver one day. Okay, so but we're going to talk about that last one today, those people that are receiving care. I have a little bit of experience in that. About 15, 16 years ago, I had a really bad automobile accident. I was T-boned by a truck out in the country, South Georgia. And by the grace of God, I lived to tell about it, but I had a very long recovery and I needed a lot of care. And that really brought to mind, through all the years I'd already been doing, working with family caregivers, that, the view of a care receiver, someone that is receiving care, is quite different than the person that's giving the care. And so I started really looking into that and what it meant to be someone that receives care and how to do that graciously. I am a pastor's wife. And if any of you are a spouse of a pastor, you know that oftentimes you've got your little families of churches that give you a lot of care. So we had been doing a little bit of, and we'd gotten a lot of that through the years, but not like what I needed at that time for my recovery. So I'm speaking somewhat from experience. As I said, I also broke my shoulder in January. And so I've now had to receive care again, closer to this talk, which I wasn't expecting to do. And once again, I really relied on those people to help me along. And so it's really been great. So I don't want us to, we seem to get so bogged down with thinking about the challenges of caregivers, and we forget about the challenges of those who are receiving care. And I'd like for that, and that's what we'd be like when we need someone to care for us, or what it would be like. So let's reflect a minute on care partnering, because I've used that terminology. I'm trying to use that terminology more and more because that's really what a lot of caregivers are using. It's not them and us, but it's care partnering with the person that you're caring for. As I said, some of you might have come to my session this morning and I talked a little bit more about that. But what it boils down to is wanting to take care of each other the way that we want to be supported ourselves. And in this situation, and the way each of us look at our role as a caregiver and a care receiver. It involves a dialogue of mutual respect, honesty, and the willingness for each partner to not take over the whole situation. Now, I admit it's easier said than done, and involves hard work, but I've seen it really happen between partners. So I'll be using some of the caregiver, care receiver language, and then I'll also be kind of mixing in there some of the care partner, trying to stay up to date with my terminology. I've heard many of my peers say that their children are trying to take away their control, their independence, and their voice in the family when they become the care receiver. I first started thinking about the topic, as I told you, many years ago when I had to receive care myself. And I came across this book, and it's called What's Worth Knowing? It's by Wendy Lustbader, and that's Lustbader, Lustbader. It's not a new book. It's been around for quite a while. And she, like Roland, went around the nation interviewing seniors themselves and asking them about what's worth knowing. So she said, what's worth knowing on living well, on people, on time, on spirituality, on marriage, on being blue, on work, on illness, on frailty, on good conduct, on regret, and on later life. Those are the different names of her chapters in her book. And so I've heard so many different reflections such as this through my career from the older adults that I've worked with. And so I want to use her book, and I'm going to read some out of her book from the characters that she and the names have been changed, most of them. But I'm going to share with you some reflections from her book, from her interviewees, as well as what I think is worth knowing about being a care receiver. And so that's where we're going to start. Okay, so the first one is 60 is different than 80 or 90. You can't lump everyone together. I believe often as a caregiver, we get kind of sucked into the stereotype of older adults. And we know, and all of us know probably a frail and disabled 60-year-old or a healthy, active 90-plus-year-old. And then we expect our parents or the one we are caring for to be the same, or we resent that they are not. We need to realize, for the sake of the person receiving care, that each person ages differently, and treat that person as who they are now, not as who we want them to be or who we expect them to be. And that is really important. And since I've worked with seniors, my whole career, I have certainly seen every different type of age. So I tend to not do the chronological ages anymore, the 60, 70, 80, and I tend to do more about them individually. And I know that Roland, I think, mentioned the go-goes, slow-goes, and no-goes, or I think you're going to mention that this afternoon, but that's kind of the one that I've also gone to also, and it's kind of a humorous way of looking at it, but that somehow does seem to fit. Okay, number 2, having relationships with older adults when one is young is very important. So I can speak personally on that one since I started working with seniors when I was 22. And I'll have to tell a funny story on myself. My parents came to visit one time, And we, of course, had a bunch of our friends over, and I had a lot of my work acquaintances and some of the people that I was working with. And so when everybody left the party that night, Mother said to me, "Don't you have any young friends?" She said, "You're only 28 years old, and everybody here tonight was an older adult." And I'm going, "Well, I invited them because y'all were coming and you could relate to them better. I thought you'd want to know them more than you would my friends, my own age friends." But anyway, I just cannot begin to tell you how wonderful it has been to go through the years knowing older adults and having them share their wisdom and share the abundance that they offer in their lives. Oftentimes with, and the reason why I went into the field of aging was because of my grandmother. When I was in college, she was diagnosed with being senile, which was the term at the time. And I thought, what's going on with that? So I had taken a developmental psychology course, and we had to pick an age and stage of life to write a paper on. And so I took aging because all of a sudden my grandmother, who was a competent nurse and had nursed actually older folks herself, was all of a sudden not the same person that she always was. And I wanted to know what was going on in her brain that made that happen. And so she was really my inspiration to go into the field. And I'm sad to say that she really never knew that I followed in her footsteps. But she really was from the very beginning, that to me. Oftentimes, grandchildren have a different type of relationship with their grandparents than their parents do with their parents. And I think we can probably all relate to that, where a grandchild seems to get along a lot better with the grandparents than the children that are trying to take on some of those roles and responsibilities as a caregiver. So I think having a relationship with older persons throughout your entire life gives you a different perspective on aging and the feelings of people who are receiving care. Number 3, people view old very differently. Everyone views old differently. I remember a cartoon that I saw many years ago that was a baby, showed a baby on the ground looking up to an older sibling saying, "Wow, he's old," and older sibling looking up to a teenager saying, "Wow, he's old," thinking, and on up. And the last person was an older person looking down to the grave and saying they sure were old. So it was just a perspective of aging through the years. I kept that cartoon for a really long time. But I remember my husband's grandmother, who lived to be 102, used to talk about the youngsters in the nursing home that were with her who were 80. That was just, how she related to them. I also know that, people view age really differently. I was in an airport line one time, and I had just come from an aging conference, national conference or something like that. And so my conference bag had something about aging on it or something like that. And an older woman was standing in front of me, and she turned around, read my bag, and she said, "Oh, do you work in a nursing home?" And so she immediately went right to, if it had anything to do with aging, that you must work in a nursing home. Or assisted living or nursing home. And I thought that was really interesting. So I took the opportunity to explain to her that not all older people live in nursing homes, and gave her a little lesson in the field of gerontology at the time. What everyone needs to realize is that the older person they are caring for probably doesn't see themselves as old and infirmed and will resist being treated that way. So I'm going to start with one of the, we're going to listen to what Viola Burns had to say about that in this book. The title of her section is "Old People Are Just People Who Have Been Around a While." She was 97 years old when she was interviewed, and this is what she said. And the interviews are really interesting in this book because they aren't all positive. Some of them are negative, some of them are positive, some make you feel really good about aging. Some of them go, "Oh, well, it's not always the best thing for that person." And so this is what she had to say. It's terrible to be disguised as a little old lady. Young people treat me like I'm a creature from another planet. I'm as feisty as ever, and you bet I know what end is up. But 15-year-old kids talk down to me. Can you beat that? Being old doesn't make a damn bit of difference. I'm reading straight from the book. I've gotten a little smaller and gained a few more wrinkles, but I'm the same person I've always been. So the little note, because she writes a little note on each one of the persons and I'll read a few of these to you, but she says, Viola Burns refused to leave her downtown apartment until she had on an attractive dress, high heels, and makeup. I advised her to forego those particular shoes, citing the large number of people in nursing homes who are there because of broken hips from falls. She replied, a lady is never seen in public without her heels. Okay, number 4 is old age is not for sissies. So I don't know if any of you remember, but a long time ago, Art Linkletter wrote a book called Old Age is Not for Sissies. And I still have it on my bookshelf. So I'm going to read the wisdom from Niles. Niles Gunderson. His title is Life Humbles You. He was 99 years old when he was interviewed. When you're young, you don't realize what you're up against. You think all those grown-ups sure have compromised. They definitely don't know how to live right. You swear there's no way you're ever going to be that way. No way. Then it starts. You run into bad luck. Even good luck can get you stuck in a certain direction. The years go by, you find things out. Some of your best laid plans go bust. Pretty soon there comes a day when some young guy with a chip on his shoulder gives you that look. He's swearing to himself never to be like you. You see it in his eyes. That's how it goes. He won't understand until his time comes. So as a care receiver, life can be very humbling and very hard to take. You find yourself outliving friends, family, maybe a spouse, child, or even a grandchild. The losses of an older person go way beyond the obvious, which is death. They can include independence, home income, security, control, to just name a few. Often the care receiver reacts to those losses and their reactions are misunderstood. Problems arise and caregiver and care recipients find that they arrive at two very different solutions. One is grounded by what older people's life experiences are saying to them. The other is what the caregiver thinks is the right thing to do. Someone once said that a caregiver and care receiver should have one golden rule. Often in caregiving situations, there is no single right answer. When you accept that, you stop resisting any opinion except your own, and you become open to seeing where someone else is coming from. That's the beginning of a very constructive dialogue and an easier life for both parties. So I'm going to read what Max has to say about that. His is called When You've Got No Other Choice, That's When You Change. Max Hastings, he was 89. When you're old, you've run out of time for excuses. First, I had to quit drinking. My liver was giving out. Then I had to give up my house. My legs couldn't navigate the stairs. Next, I had to go live with a bunch of biddies with puffy hair. I couldn't imagine on my own. Humiliating is what it was, every last bit of it. The strangest thing is, I'm happier than I've ever been. My son says he likes his sober father. The biddies keep bringing me pies and they flock around me at the mailboxes. I may not be such a bad fellow after all. Okay, the next one, number 5, is that no one is an expert on aging. And we're going to hear from Helmut Mayer. His firm convictions are easiest to maintain when you're young. Show me someone getting on in years, and I'll show you someone who doesn't have a lot of answers. Don't ask me what life is for. I can't figure it out yet. I used to know, but I thought I did. Early on, you think just because something seems a certain way to you, that's how it is. Case closed. But as you get older, how many times are you sure of something and then it turns out that you were dead wrong? Young people often think of the old are set in their ways, but they're just on the surface, just a bunch of petty habits and the like. Old people are actually the open-minded ones. So when I was 23, I guess I'd been working in the field for about a year. I went to do a presentation in a small rural community in Texas where I was living at the time. And it was for a Kiwanis club or something like that. And the little small newspaper of the community came out the next week, and there was a picture of me standing behind the podium like this. And the title said, "Expert on Aging." Well, I looked about 12. I was a very young looking 22, 23-year-old. Well, I sent the newspaper article to my mother because I was so proud. She said she laughed for days on that one. And I really have to think, I wish I still had that newspaper, but I don't. But it was just really great. I certainly had a lot to learn from then on. But not even older adults themselves are experts. One needs to seek help from many people as a caregiver and a care receiver. If you can find a support group for care receivers, that's a real bonus. So if you find support groups out there for caregivers, try to find one that's going to be there for care receivers also. If there is a lot of strife in a caregiving situation, don't think that professional help is needed only for the caregiver. Remember the care receiver, and they also can use a lot of help. And no one is an expert on aging. So please keep your ears open. The sixth one, persons who find success in old age have learned to like their own company. And that's probably my favorite one, because you never think about, and I think about a lot of people that are introverts and that really like their own company. A perfect example is my husband and I. Despite the fact that he is a minister, he is an introvert. He likes his own company. He likes being by himself. He doesn't always want to be talking to people. He doesn't always have to be friendly. He doesn't want to, he does his job as a minister and he's a really friendly guy, and a lot of people would be very surprised to know that he's an introvert, but he really is, because he likes his own company. Me, on the other side, want to be around people and I want to talk and I want to do all of that. And it's not that I don't like my own company, but really it's a good example of him. So how many times have you heard a caregiver complain, "Mother just doesn't want to do anything. She just sits there all day. Why can't I get her to do something?" I believe that it's important for a caregiver to give a care receiver as many options as possible, then live with what they choose. Too often the caregiver wears themselves out, feeling that they have to keep that person busy all the time, caring for their wants and needs, and they have to stay busy and they have to stay active. It is more than likely that the care receiver might perceive that that asking for assistance is something that might be admitting that they have a weakness or they are incapable. So we really need to kind of look at people that really do enjoy their own company, that are happy with being with themselves, with what they're doing. And oftentimes, that's just, how things are with that person. Okay, number 7. Listening and making choices is really important. And I've often done workshops on active listening. And, someone once said that, the reason why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth was because they wanted you to listen. And so I think that problems that might arise in a care partner situation with a care receiver and a caregiver is that people quit listening to each other and quit offering choices. The caregivers get so wrapped up in the stuff that they have to deal with that they don't take the time to sit down and listen and really listen to the person they're care partnering with. They also don't think beyond one choice to offer. Sometimes problems and challenges can be solved by just hearing the person out or giving them more than one choice to respond to. So having worked in the field for many, many, many years and talking to many, many, many seniors, even if a senior would call and with a complaint or talk about, well, this happened at the senior center and it shouldn't have happened this way, or, I thought I was going to be getting Meals on Wheels today and I don't really like the food and blah, blah, blah. Mostly they just wanted somebody to listen to them. And so I could sit there on the phone and talk them through, and I would solve problems. I don't want you to think I was avoiding their problems, but most of the time it was just somebody that they really wanted to listen to. And of course that can have the negative side of that, is that some seniors will get on the phone with somebody, and because that person listens to them, that person talks them out of funds and whatever other things. But so you have to watch that sometimes. But so sometimes problems and challenges can be solved by just listening and the person out, or giving them more than one choice to respond to. And even a person with dementia needs to be listened to. Because oftentimes we think that, just because they're dealing with some type of challenge, cognitive challenge, that they can't hear things, but they really can. If nothing else, with dementia, they might not hear what your question is. They might not be able to respond directly, but they know what the feeling is that you are transmitting through your voice. And so you can use that feeling, and they will know that that person was kind to me, even if that person said, God, I hate your guts. But if they said it really nicely, boy, I hate your guts, they're going to remember your the way you said it, and that kind of information more so than they are the other. The care receiver gets so bogged down with their loss of independence that they never ask the caregiver to think about how they are dealing with a certain situation. And so it goes both ways. It's not just one way. Okay, number 8, and this is an important one. I think you've got a speaker talking this afternoon on dementia, but physical ability has nothing to do with mental ability. And we tend to always, fall into that thing that a feeble body is associated with a demented mind. And that's not the case at all. And we all know people that you would say, oh yes, I know this person. And so we don't want you to immediately fall to the conclusion that somebody that's older is going to have a dementia, which, the percentages are really low when it comes right down to it, or that because they have a physical disability, they are dealing with other things going on in their life, because it just isn't so. And that's just really an important thing to remember. And I hope you will take that away, because it really is important. The quality of life is more important than the quantity of years. Okay, so this is about your quality over quantity, and we're going to get some advice from Tilly. Let's see where she is. Okay, her name is Tilly Becker, and the title of hers is Nobody Wants to Be Somebody Else's Burden. She's 83. Back home, I had friends galore. I had my card games. I had places to walk. It was a life. But then it seemed like moving near my daughter was a sensible thing to do. Blood is thicker than water. I was turning 80, getting to where I might need some help. So I figured it was time. But I should have known kids have their own lives, busy, busy, busy. It's a big deal that they're able to fit in a little time with me. I feel like I'm just one more task on each of their lists. I can see it in their eyes. Coming over here is an obligation, not a pleasure. My grandson carries around a little computer that tells him when he can see his grandma and for how long. Everyone's always looking at the clock. You know what you wish for what you wish for at my age? That you have people around who enjoy you. My friends and I loved being together. It was good with them. I was good with them. I wish I'd stayed put. So the note that was made on Wendy Lusbader made was, Tilly Becker saw the approach to potential frailty and tried to be prudent. She told me that she made her decision to move near her family after one of her friends had fallen and broken her hip. Her friend had a great deal of difficulty finding paid helpers to assist her after her return from the hospital. And then one of those helpers stole some valuable items from her apartment while she was taking a nap. That was it for Tilly. She put her condo up for sale. And so oftentimes I get lots and lots of questions from the caregivers in particular. Should I move mom close to me? I've lived away from my mom for many, many years. She lived in her community. She has her church. She has these things going on, but I'm thinking I'm her only family member and I just need to bring her closer to me. So we talk about that a lot. And I really, talk to a lot of caregivers about that and really ask them to look at that from the care receiver's point of view, and to look and see, what they're feeling about it. Again, going back to kind of using the I language instead of you, instead of saying you really should move, using the I language as, I feel like, if I was getting older and I lived a long ways away from my family, and would I want to move close to them, away from my friends in my church or whatever I've got going on there, to lead close to them? Or would I be better staying where I am and having them visit me? My husband and I thought about that a lot recently. Our children are 800 and 2,000 miles away from us. And so we are not close to them at all. And when I fell and broke my shoulder, that would have been great if I had been close to my kids. But it's, but you have to really look at that quality and quantity. We really love celebrating big birthdays. Everybody's always excited about celebrating 100 when someone turns 100 years old. But people are living longer, but they're not necessarily living healthier. In fact, there's a real concern from the national health agencies that people are really dealing with a lot of health issues. Not health issues that are going to kill you, but health issues that are going to leave you disabled for many years, and especially in your older years. So you could live well into your 80s and 90s, but you might be living with a disability. So there's a lot of gray areas today. The care receiver might become bitter because of some of those things that are happening to them. When the care receiver talks of death as a relief, let them express themselves and listen. And again, one day you might be in that same situation, and think about what you would be dealing with yourself along those lines. Okay, number 10, a sense of humor is critical. That is so true. For the care receiver as well as the caregiver. I used to have a woman that I worked with who was caregiving for her mom who lived in her home, and she was actually my boss. And she would come into work and she would always have a Ruby story. Her mother had dementia, and she didn't want to really, she knew I understood. She knew my work with caregivers. And so she knew that she could come in and talk about what Ruby might have done that she thought was kind of humorous, but she would never say to others because she didn't want anybody to judge her for being an uncaring daughter, but she knew it was always, so she was always telling me these funny stories about Ruby. And we would, kind of get started each day with some of those tales. And I think that's, and she would actually, talk about them with her mom. Her mother was worked in a florist. And when they would go to this one Asian restaurant that always had this beautiful artificial bouquet up by the cash register, she would leave the table mid-dinner and go up there and start taking it apart and putting it back together right there at the cash register. And the woman that held in the restaurant was very kind and let her do that. And so that was kind of her job when she got to this restaurant, was rearranging this one artificial plant by the cash register. But that was kind of a funny story that Judy was able to share with me, and that she even shared with her mom, and her mom would laugh and say, I didn't do that. And she go, well, yeah, Mom, you did, and she would go, oh, that's so funny. Well, I was a florist for a long time, and that's what I know. And so, anyway, so it's really important to laugh. So I'm going to read you some wisdom from Rosie. You've got to keep a sense of humor. Rosie Mills, and she was 90. Seeing what's funny, even in a terrible situation, is the only way to live. I learned this from my grandmother. She took care of me when I came down with polio at the age of 9. One day we were driving in one of those early model cars, half open at the sides, and I had a leg spasm. I started sliding down off the seat. My grandmother leaned over and grabbed me and pulled me back up. But meanwhile, she plowed into a telephone pole. The car was a mess. People came over to help us, and she told them, at least I kept her in her seat. Bill and I were married almost 70 years, short by just 2 weeks. On the day he died, he asked me to get in bed with him. He was cold. He wanted me to put my arms around him and warm him up. So as I was climbing into bed, I said, Bill, this sounds like a proposition. Without missing a beat, he answered, gosh, I wish to God it was. That was the last thing he ever said to me. I smile whenever I think of it. How am I doing on time? Okay. The next one, number 11, is you have to go with the flow. You have to make lemon out of lemonades. And we're going to listen to what Sophie's wisdom is on that. And Sophie's the one on the front cover holding the baby. Her name is Sophie Noble, and she said, don't fight things you can't change. And she's 86. For a long time after I lost my sight, I was going to doctors looking for them to make things better for me. I felt cheated. Why did this have to happen to me? I can't even read the directions on the back of a frozen meal. Just recently, something in me clicked. I woke up one morning and said to myself, I want to live, so this is it. I have certain medical problems and they're not going to get any better. It's time to start living again, a different life, but at least it's life. Now I wake up in the morning and I'm not complaining. My son writes the directions with a thick marker on the back of my frozen meals. So the note on her was, she might have sounded, that way in the interview, but the note on her was, having lost most of her vision, Sophie Noble uprooted herself from the community where she had resided for over 50 years. She did not want to burden her friends with looking after her, and so moved 3,000 miles away to son and daughter-in-law's community. Then, despite her family's ample tenderness and solitude, she fell into a period of mourning the loves and liberties she had lost. So none of us really look into our futures and see ourselves as being dependent on one another. Most of the time, if you ask somebody, if you ask somebody in their 60s, how old do you expect to live? They are not going to say probably 90, 95, or 100, but the possibilities these days are pretty good. I know when I do talks to groups and about their future planning, I ask them, and I don't have the stats in my head right now, but I ask them how many of them know where they want to live when they get older. How many of them know what their financial situation is going to be. And then I give them some statistics on, if you're 60 today, your possibility of living, and Roland talked about those earlier today already, and what your possibility of living so much longer. If you're 65 today, I guess your possibility of living to 85 was, I forgot what your stat was, but it was a good one. And I know it's a good one. But so we really need to, look at our lives and what we're going to do with those lives. When we lose our dependence and our independence, then that for very long, then problems do arise, and we decide we want to make those problems into challenges and face them, or we can continually hit our heads against a brick wall and say, poor me. I don't know about you, but no matter what I face in my later years, I really hope that I'm a Sophie, and I try to stay as positive as possible with what my situation is. Okay, so my last one, we're going to hear from Gerald. And the last one is having faith is important. And I probably don't need to tell anybody in this room that information. But I can tell you that the thousands of older adults that I've worked with and for, and I've seen throughout my career, It is so obvious that those that have faith are just living the life. I mean, that they are just so sure of themselves, or they're so find life so much fuller toward the end with their faith. So this is from Ella Jones. She's 68, and it says, "Accept whatever you are granted." It used to be that I felt safe only when I was going through a hard time. You get accustomed to being miserable. The minute things got easier, I got nervous. I was sure the Lord was going to take it away, all away. But a few years ago, I went to death's door. My heart attack was so bad, they had the morgue on the line when I came to. Now here I am, what they call a cardiac cripple. I can hardly move without getting short of breath. The strange thing is I'm more peaceful than I've ever been. I take each day one at a time. Whatever I can do, I do. Every day I feel I'm just blessed the fact that I'm still here. Now that's the way to live. And it said that the note was, according to her daughter, Ella Jones went from being a nervous wreck to living with Buddha-like calm after her heart attack. Her illness made her realize that she was in a territory that she could manage, and she presided over that with confidence. And then Gerald, and his is called God Acts Through You, Not For You, and he's 62. I can't stand people who sit around waiting for God to get them what they want, as if God has nothing better to do. They complain about their lot in life, how they don't have this or that. I don't have much sympathy for that kind of talk. I'd rather hear what you've done lately for someone else, or what steps you've taken to get out of the pickle you're in. We've got to do our part. We have to make some kind of an effort. That's the divine in us, making use of the gifts we are given. So if the person that you're caring for has been a churchgoer in later life, you can pretty well assume that they want to continue doing that no matter any way that they possibly can. So they need to make sure that the church knows that they are no longer able to attend and what they can do. The church can help in a variety of ways. And we've already talked about that a lot today, so I won't go into that, but they can help certainly with transportation. In this day and time, they can help with the computer piece, so people can really stay connected. Lots of people don't come to church for a variety of reasons. They might not come because they don't have transportation. It's really difficult for them to sit for extended amount of time. And then the unmentionable thing, needing to go to the bathroom in the middle of the service. They're not going to stand up and walk out of the congregation because they're afraid somebody will see them. And they'll say, I wonder where she's going. And so you need to just be aware of all of those things. When my grandmother, who had dementia, was reaching her late stage of her disease, she was also a minister's wife, and she really loved church music. And even though she really couldn't think clearly and didn't know my mother anymore and things like that, she did know church music. So mother gave her a DVD player and a bunch of cassettes of church hymns. And she would just listen to those all day, every day. And that's really what calmed her down. And all the nurses knew that toward the end. And it was really important to her. And so having her faith was really important to her. And I think we need to remember that, and particularly with those people that are receiving care, not only those that are giving care. Okay.